specifically to find if there were deficits in the temporal lobe of the brain, they used what's called a small volume correction. The brain is, of course, enormous, and there are many, many different ways to analyze it, and points in the brain to analyze. The statistical folks among you will, of course, immediately start saying, oh, you have this multiple testing problem. Sooner or later, you're going to find something significant. The way to avoid that, or at least to minimize that in brain research, is to focus specifically on the areas of the brain you're interested in. So the temporal lobe theorists focused on the temporal lobe of the brain, and were indeed able to find in certain parts of the brain that there were less dense, areas of less dense gray matter. Fine. However, the frontal lobe theorists did exactly the same thing. They compared a relatively small group of pedophiles, contrasting them with regular healthy controls from the community, and used a small volume correction because they were focusing specifically on the frontal lobe of the brain, and found that there were less dense areas in gray matter in the frontal lobe of the brain. Remember that famous story about the blind monks and the elephant? So the monks who were examining the tail of the brain would feel the tail and it's kind of fluffy. An elephant is much like a broom. And the guy at the side was feeling up, and it's large. Oh, yes, okay, elephants must be much like a wall. But if you step back and take all of the independent observations as one large set of findings, that's when you get to perceive the elephant. Unfortunately, when we look only at individual parts of the brain, we're only feeling around in either finding or not finding the specific thing we're looking for instead of getting the big picture. Now, because I was well supported, I hope somebody's here from CAHR, because I had the grant funding, I could gather a much larger sample. I didn't have to focus on any particular part of the brain. Every point in the brain had an even